the common vision of the world's religion. I'm really not a lecturer, I'm a teacher, and as such I feel incomplete without a blackboard. So I will have to ask you to draw castles in the air and just follow me in my outline. If there were a blackboard here, I would place on it in ascending order 3 words. Do, D-O-R-A-R-E, and at the top, C, S-E-E. Because there are 3 things that are important in our lives. The first is what we do, and this we can think of as ethics. The second is who we are, and this is a little bit less tight, but I think you will see the connection. Who we are translates into virtues, because I put it to you that the deepest index to who we are turns on what virtues we do or do not incarnate. And then finally, what we see. And that translates into vision. So in these minutes that are going to be going by very rapidly, I intend to report to you what the world's great wisdom traditions say in unison about these 3 important factors. We begin with ethics, or what we should do. There are 4 major problem areas in human life. The first of these is force. The second is possessions. The third is the spoken word. And the fourth is sex. Now, in other species, these 4 areas are monitored by instincts. Let's just begin with force. Nature read in tooth and claw used to be a fashionable adage. Not true. Across the board, violence is relatively contained in the other areas. Last I heard, looked into it, only 2 species engage in warfare, for example. And it's true that lions can fight if it comes to, they're hungry and it comes to a carcass. However, with rare exceptions like squirrels that lay up for the winter months, their acorns or nuts, animals do not hoard. After the lion's stomach is filled, it turns away, and the other creature can take the carcass. So violence isn't really a great problem in the other species, but in human beings we know. All the way from feuds, blood feuds, vendetta, all the way to all-out war. When we turn to possession, I see I've mixed up a little. I've already talked a bit about possession, but other animals do not hoard. They will conflict to get if their stomachs are empty. When it comes to the spoken word, well, we're dog lovers and can testify that animals can be devious for sure, but I'm not sure that they can outright lie. And then when it comes to sex, this is pretty much handled by periodicity. However, we, the human beings, are the animals without instinct, and so all four of these can be danger zones, which, if we negotiate the rapids well, then we get out into the calm seas, but our rafts can easily turn over. Now, because these are tricky zones and danger zones, every religion must speak to them, and they speak to them in remarkable unity. What they say, and I'll rely here on the Decalogue regarding force, their word is do not kill. Now, no, this isn't the last word to be said about force. It is rather the first word that must be spoken, a sort of a minimum floor level on this, which if it is not honored, makes other words impossible. Now, none of the traditions are absolutely pacifist. They allow for a just war, and they allow for the taking of individual lives under due authority. Tragically, these exceptional cases must be allowed, they say. However, outside of those, do not kill, thou shalt commit no murder. In the second area, they're not against possessions, private property. They are not against going after material goods as long as one observes guidelines of fair play. But one thing is forbidden: the direct pilfering from somebody else's pile that they have put in their hard labors on and putting it over onto your pile. This creates passions, releases passions of injustice and unfairness that can rip a community apart. Thou shalt not steal. In the third area, they allow for certain circumlocutions and white lies and skidding the borders a little bit, but in important areas when we have to know what went on, if we find you deliberately distorting the truth, then we'll have to take action. Thou shalt not bear false witness, or in the Buddhist injunction, right speech. And then finally, when we come to the fourth problem area, sex, this is the one that has the greatest gamut within it, because the first three, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie, one sees that those are negative things. But when it comes to sex, the ambiguity of this drive runs the whole spectrum. At its best, when sex is suffused and guided by deep love, when each party most wants from the other what the other party wants most to give, and when the union is so complete that it's impossible to say whether the experience is more physical or spiritual, more attuneness coming together or a pure oneness at climax. It may be, it has been ventured, that at its very best, the sexual experience opens the clearest window into the bliss that God constantly enjoys, that we human beings can experience. But then at the other end, pornography, rape, child abuse, the most sordid kinds of degradation. And so it is perhaps not surprising, given this wide gamut, that the religions have more diversity here than on the other 3 points. Some of them regard chastity as the supreme handling of this drive. There we would have Christianity in its classical form, and Buddhism and Hinduism, where the celibate condition is regarded as the most advanced. Not so in Judaism, nor in Islam, nor in Taoism. Islam does not have a strict counterpart to canonization of saints, but it has something analogous to it, and I've been told that only one Muslim has ever been, so to speak, canonized as a saint who was a celibate. Because what can you expect in the way of spiritual attainment from someone who has not proved himself or herself in the wearing blender of the marital relationship? That's where you find out where the true metal of a person is. So much for ethics. Remember, these are not the final words in their various subjects. They are the first words that must be spoken if further words are going to be relevant. Now we move from ethics to the virtues. And I breathe more freely when we do that. These other thou shalt nots are sort of like stop signs, you know. They're necessary, but who likes stop signs? They're not very appealing. But the virtues, we come to light when we come to the virtues. Beginning with the word itself. I have had occasion to ask myself recently, I wonder if any of you can think of a word which over the decades and centuries has improved in its meaning. The meaning has grown in luster. I have put my mind to the task and cannot think of a single one. I can think of a number where the meaning has degenerated, and I'll be mentioning 2 or 3 before I'm through. And here is the first one, virtues. When we think about virtues, we now think of in moral terms. A virtuous man or woman is a moral man or woman. Now, that meaning was there from the beginning, but what has been lost is another meaning that came solidly together with it, which was power. Power. Now, we still occasionally hear echoes of that other original meaning, as, for example, I've heard the phrase, the virtue of a drug. Now, that doesn't mean that this little pill behaved morally or immorally. It bespeaks the power in that drug. And see what this says is, in the original conception, power was linked with goodness. Goodness empowers the person who embodies it. Now, from that original understanding, what are the virtues which all these traditions honor in common? in our Western idiom, they are humility, charity, and veracity. I will come to the Asian counterpart in a moment. But let's come to the first, humility. Another word that has fallen on evil days. I sometimes feel angry at Charles Dickens because I think he did in that word humility with Uriah Heep, groveling, cringing, hand wringing, I am so humble. Not at all. In its original meaning, which is full of dignity, humility is to look upon yourself as one and fully one. Stand up straight. It is linked with self-respect, but not more than one. Just as charity is to look upon one's neighbor as fully one, just as you are fully one, and being as fully one as you are, as entitled to his or her interests and well-being, and ideally the person of humility will think of the neighbor's well-being on the same par as his or hers. As for veracity, that begins, to be sure, with truth-telling and not lying. However, that's only the beginning. It's like the runway from which it takes off to climb, ideally, to a sublime objectivity which enables one to see everything in the world exactly as it is. Now, Asia has the same three, but in a very interesting way. They prefer to talk not about the three virtues, but about the three poisons. The three poisons which stand in the way of our attaining these virtues. Those three are greed, hatred, and delusion. And if I had a blackboard, you can see that they match up completely. Greed, give me, and distorting oneself out of all proportion is the opposite of humility. And then hatred is the opposite of charity. And delusion is the opposite of veracity. Now, in talking with my Asian friends, I've gotten in the interesting discussion because I say, well, what you say is true, but poisons have such a negative ring about them. And I, as a Westerner, accentuate the positive, Why don't you talk about the virtues more? And they say, well, we see your point, but there's this advantage to talking about the poison. The virtues are out there. They are things we aspire to and hope to rise to. The poisons are right here. They are immediate. They are here every day in every action to deal with. And so we prefer to think in terms of expunging from our lives the poisons in them, in the confidence that with every incremental expulsion of an ingredient poison, the virtues will flow in of their own accord to take their place. Finally, there is vision. What do we see? And here again, the great wisdom traditions of the world speak with a wonderful unanimity. I will target tonight what I have prioritized as the three most important claims that they make about the ultimate nature of reality. The first is that things in their final nature are more unified. They are more whole. They cohere more than our everyday experience allows or gives evidence of. Normally, we see things in kind of dribs and drabs, and this event and another one following hard on its heels, and the connections are not clear. Have you heard of the ultimate educational toy to give your children or your grandchildren? It's a jigsaw puzzle, no two pieces of which will fit together. That's what will really prepare them for life. And so it often seems the absurdities, the surge, the contradictions, and so on. But that is because we see things from such a narrow, small framework. Very little perspective. The things that are close to us, in our interests and our concerns and our well-being, is a kind of little hot spot of being around ourselves. And things on the other side of the world we view, if we think of them at all, as remote, detached. And the unity can come only from the wide expanse of a large vision. They use the example repeatedly of a magnificent tapestry. It is though we are looking at such a tapestry, but in our ordinary life, we're looking at it from the wrong side. And you know what that looks like. A meaningless crisscross of threads of different colors, knots and snippets and so on. And that's the way life normally appears. These traditions are, as it were, inviting us to let them take our hands and take us around to the front of the tapestry where we can see its true design. The second thing that they all say about reality is not only is it more unified, and by the way, before I leave that, this is one point where science in its deeper understanding of nature is saying exactly the same thing with regard to the physical universe, because the deeper the scientists probe into underlying structures, the more the laws of nature come together. Already 3 of the 4 forces are unified into one. They're still trying to bring the 4th one in. So there's a very interesting parallelism there. But now, the second point they say is not only are things more unified than we normally realize, they are also better. Now, here is where we have to think a little bit about quantity. And let me begin again with science. In the symbolism of space, the horizontal line symbolizes space. The world spreads out on either side, no wider than the mind is wide. Space is horizontally monitored. And think for a moment with me about how much, through modern science, our understanding of the spatial dimension of nature has increased over what we could have supposed, as long as people had only their sense organs to monitor space. What is it? Light travels at 186,000 miles a second, and then you multiply that by the number of seconds in a year, and you have a light year. Already it's going off of a chart of my powers to imagine, but then we multiply that by 1 billion years, and then by 20 billion light years across, what an expanse beyond our ordinary experience of space. And now I'm going to tell you something you won't believe. These traditions say that the vertical axis, which symbolically everywhere monitors worth, the superior is above, the inferior is below. They say that this vertical axis is as much beyond our everyday experience, that is the worth, the ultimate worth of reality in its final nature, call it God if you want, is as much up there, far up there, as the scientists tell us the vertical arm extends in space. It staggers credibility because this vertical arm reaches to, in the Latin, ens perfectissimum, perfect being, absolute perfection reign. Because it boggles the mind. The Hindus put it in more Sunday school form in their Puranas. They ask us, think of the happiest person in the world. I'll give you just 2 seconds. Just identify that in your imagination. There are 7 heavens in the Hindu cosmology. This is quite archetypal. All right, now in the first heaven, the happiest person on earth, the equivalent would be 1,000,000 times happier than that person. Now, we go to the second heaven. How much do you think happiness goes up? Well, maybe in that heaven, happiness is 2,000,000 times than the happiest person here. Oh no, 1,000,000 times happier. And it keeps on going exponentially. Sometimes I think the reason that I'm drawn to these wisdom traditions is their exuberance, because they have very glorious estimates of the nature of the final reality. I want, before I go to the last point, I want to just build in here a simple poem, because it has throughout the years haunted me. I came upon it in college. Many of you may know it. It's by Rudyard Kipling, and it's called The Explorer. And for me, at that time, it just locked in with this notion of exuberance, because as you will hear, what it counsels, again, let me backtrack. I'm not going to tell you the point of the poem, I'll tell you the poem, and then you can draw your own moral, because it's pretty obvious. It runs like this. There's no sense in going further, so they said, and I believed them. Built my barns and strung my fences in that little border station tucked away against, and the foothills where the trails run out and stop, till a voice as bad as conscience run innumerable changes, night and day repeating so. Something hidden, go and find it. Go and look behind the ranges. Something lost behind the ranges, lost and waiting for you. Go. And that sounds a note, even though the word is simple, that anywhere we come in life and think that that's a resting place, we're shortchanging our possibilities, because there is always the more that lures as the more lures the explorer. And now finally, they all say that reality is more mysterious than we realize. The true enemy of the spiritual quest is everydayness, namely settling for the obvious, the conventional wisdom, as though that were the whole of things. Not so, they say. Reality is mysterious. And here I come to my last word that has fallen among thieves and lost its original luster. The word mystery, I am outright angry at the mystery novel writers, the detective stories, for stealing that word. Detective mystery is no mystery at all. It's a problem. Who done it? And on the last page we find out. But a mystery is altogether different. It is that special kind of problem which the more we learn about it, and we do advance in our learning, but the point is that the deeper we get into it, the more the horizon recedes with every step forward we take. So that the more we understand it, the more we come to see that there is about it that we do not know, that we did not even, were not even aware of when we started out. There are two kinds of unknown. The known unknown, but then there is the unknown unknown, which we weren't even aware of at the start. So the larger the island of knowledge, the longer the shoreline of mystery. And that is the way it is as we try to plumb, as we should always keep trying to plumb the ultimate mystery. Before I leave that subject, I will give you two examples of mysteries. The first is God, and the second is yourself. By the way, the two are rather intimately linked, because the traditions all say that the deepest component of our being is, if not literally and actually God, as some of them say, at least the reflection or the image of God in the Imago Dei. But on citing oneself, yourself, as a second mystery, I always think of Carl Jung. I know of no one who gave as much of his life to systematically trying to understand himself as Carl Jung did. He blocked out, what was it, 2 hours a day to analyze his dreams, constantly trying to understand. It makes me tired to think about it. But you know the line, very telling, very honest, In memories, dreams, and reflections at the close of his life, he said, as I approach the close of my life, I am more of a mystery to myself than I have ever been.